AutoCAD 1-2D Drafting, Boston Architectural College. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at annotation for the final project and working with the annotative property. Here we see our drawing of existing conditions, and in this file we have made the text styles that were on one of the handouts. So if we open that up, we can see that here are the text styles all listed, and then you'll see some of them have the annotative property associated with them. So the anno labels and anno notes, the annotative property is turned on, and that's something that we'll be using in these drawings because we'll be showing these drawings at different scales. We have a little correction to make here. This should also be Arial in this drawing, so let me just change that font to the Arial and hit apply, and then we'll go take a look at the other one here. Also should not be the Romans SHX, but the Arial TTF or two-type font. So that's what we'll change that to. We check a couple of others. They all look good. Okay. Yep. The height there, we don't want the height set on that because that's going to be used inside a style that will be annotative. So let's change that. Let me check the others. Wants me to save that first. Okay, everything else is set. These are the sizes for the annotative blocks. So that is all appropriate in there. Okay, so I think our text styles are in pretty good shape at this point. Just want to make sure everything's done before we get too far into the drawing. And let's close that. So good, we're in good shape with our text styles. So let's take a look at the Dimension Style Manager. We open that up, and right now there's really nothing in here except the standard styles that come shipped. So let's close that, and we need to bring into our drawing, or populate our drawing with dimension styles that we can use to annotate, dimension our existing conditions and also our proposed conditions in this final project. So one way to do that, let's go and take a look at some styles that we already created. And if I open up my design center, that's simply type in DC on the command line, enter. I'll just show you that, how to make sure that you understand how that works. So DC on the command line, enter, and the design center opens up. And I'm going to go look at the folders and browse to my drawings, and I have my drawing, my shaft mount block drawing here. I'm going to find that folder and open that up in Design Center and click on the name of that drawing, the shaft mount block, and in there we have the dimension styles that we made. And this is appropriate because in that exercise we used annotation or annotative property. So I'm going to select all those styles and just drag them into my open final project drawing. And now if I go look at the Dimension Style Manager, there they all are. And also while I'm in here, why don't I grab the multi-leader style. So there's the mech leader, and I'll click on that and drag that in. And if you remember also from the shaft mount block drawing, that style had the annotative property assigned to it. So we're done with the Design Center. Let's close that. Now let's open up the Dimension Style Manager, and I'm just going to rename these because now we're in an architectural project and we're going to be changing some of the settings. So I'm going to rename, and I'm going to put in that arc Anno for the dimension style. And then I'm going to go to the Modify button because all the settings are still set for the mechanical drawing. So let's open that up. And in my drawing, it opens up to the Units tab, the Primary Units tab. So the first thing I want to do is change that to Architectural. Change the precision to 1/16 of an inch. And yeah, 1/16 is good. So let's go to the Fit tab. And on the Fit tab, we see that the annotative property is already turned on here. Let's make sure that it is turned on. And that's because we used this dimension style in our shaft mount block drawing, and it had the annotative property. Let's go to our text, and we need to change the text style that was being used to the Anno, or the arc dim text rather. And the text height is going to be set at 3/32 of an inch. And everything else here, I think we can align with the dimension line above center. All that good stuff looks fine, as was done in the shaft mount block, but here it is for our architectural drawing, should be fine too. Let's check symbols and arrows, and here we want to change the right angle to something called the architectural tick, because that's typically what is used in architectural drawings, these little slash marks. And I'm going to change that size here. There's some strange number appearing here that converted from the decimal, so let's put in 1/16 of an inch for the arrow size. And I think that's all we really need to do on this symbols and arrows page or tab. Let's go to lines, and everything here looks good, but now you'll notice that here this little option comes available to us, extend beyond tick mark. So I want to change that to 1/8 of an inch. Now let's leave it at 3/32 because that's a number that's reoccurring in our drawing. So 3/32 of an inch there. Extend beyond dim lines, 3/32 also. Offset from origin, 1/8. I think we'll leave that. We have the extension line color changed to red. So that all looks good to us, and so I'm going to click OK. It brings us back. And now you see an odd thing that happens here. AutoCAD seems to have reproduced our dimension style, but don't worry about that. It kind of goes away after a minute or two, and I'm not sure exactly why that happens. So I'm just going to close that now that we have our dimension style set. And now let's take a look at the leaders. Open up the leader style manager, and there's our mech leader, again imported from our shaft mount block drawing through Design Center. We're going to change the name of that just as we did in the dimension style. So right click on that name and hit the rename option, and then type in whatever you'd like. Well, in this case, not whatever you'd like, but what I'd like you to do, which in this case is going to be arc. I'll go to the end and back out the, we'll leave a leader, and then we'll put in anno at the end. So arc-leader-anno. So it's very clear to us that that is going to be an annotative dimension style, or leader style rather. So let's go to the leader format, and I'm going to change it in my drawing from the spline or curvy line to the straight line. My particular choice, you can leave it as a spline if you'd like. And once I do that, I have to check that the constraints number of but here on the leader structure, make sure the annotative is turned on, because that is what's important for us here. And then for the text style, we need to change that to the arc notes, and here we will set the height in this style, in the style for the annotative leaders, to the 1/8 inch. And go back and just check everything there. Arrowhead, let's change that to the closed filled. And again, some odd number that got translated from the decimal, so let's overwrite that and place that as a fraction. And I'll put that in as 1/8 of an inch for the arrowhead on the leader. Okay, now we can go OK. And now we're back to the style manager, and there's our arc leader anno, and so we can and it has the little annotative symbol next to it, meaning it is annotative, which is good for us. So let's close that and go back to our drawing. Okay, so the first thing, let's do this. Let's change the active dimension style to the arc anno. And I'm going to start putting some dimensions on our plan. Let's take a look at the annotative scale on our drawing, and it is set to 1:1 right now. So let's click on linear, and I get a little warning because I'm putting a dimension in, an annotative dimension at 1:1, and that causes some problems. So, but let's just proceed anyway and do it, and we'll place it in. So there's my linear dimension, and if I zoom in, sure enough, it looks kind of strange. There are no parts of the dimension there. We don't see the dimension text, we don't see the dimension arrows. However, if we zoom in really close, there is in fact the text there. But why is it so small? Well, it's so small because the actual height of the text, if you remember, was, if we go back and look, and go to the text tab, the actual height of the text is 3/32 of an inch. So if our drawing scale is set at 1:1, AutoCAD is going to place that text on our drawing at that height, at 3/32 of an inch. So that's why it appears so small. However, if I go now, and what's if you have 3/32 of an inch against a large building, it's going to be a tiny object. So that's literally what's happening here. Our 3/32 is being compared to a full-size building, and and therefore it is tiny. So let's change the drawing scale to say 1/4 of an inch. And notice what happens when I do that. That dimension that I just placed on my drawing disappears. And the reason it does that is because it was placed at 1:1. So it right now won't display at 1/4 of an inch. But let me place another dimension in with the drawing scale set at 1/4 of an inch, and sure enough, that looks more appropriate. So now we see something that we're familiar with, a dimension object that has the number, has the arrowheads or slashes, and all the components that we're used to. Now there is an annotative control which we can turn on here, which will show any annotative object no matter what the scale is set in our drawing. So if I turn that on down here, and you notice if I click that off, it disappears. That one I was only showing because it is at 1/4 of an inch. Now if I go change that to 1:1, the 1/4 of an inch one disappears and the 1:1 shows. And if I turn this control on, which shows all annotation objects no matter what scale, I can see both of the dimension objects that we placed, the one placed at 1/4 of an inch and the one placed at 1 inch equals 1. So to demonstrate something here, I'm going to delete the dimension that we put in at the 1/4 inch scale. So I'll get rid of this one here, and we're back to the odd one that was placed at 1:1. And there's our scale there, and I'm going to set the scale now at 1/4, and I turned off the show annotative objects at all scales, and I'll turn it back on again so we can see it. So the drawing scale is now set at 1/4, and the object that was placed at 1:1 is being shown because I've turned on that button that controls all the showing all annotative objects. Now I'm going to select this object that we placed at 1:1, and I'm going to open up the properties dialog, and here it says I've selected a rotated dimension, and one of the settings here is the annotative scale. So if I click on that, there's a little box at the end. If I click on that, you'll see that the object scale list only has on it 1:1, so therefore it will only show or only display when the drawing scale is 1:1. But I can add other scales to this object, so I'll click on the add button. I'm going to check 1/4 and go OK, and now that is added to the list, and then go OK again. And now sure enough, you see on our screen that our annotative object is now showing appropriately at the 1/4 inch scale. So the size of the object, of the elements of the object, the dimension text, arrowheads and such have adjusted accordingly. And now I can turn off that button that controls the display of all annotation objects, and because I am set at 1/4 inch and it has the 1/4 inch scale, I can also go to 1:1, and it still displays, but it displays oddly again because the size is so tiny on the various components. But it is displaying at the 1:1 scale because we've added that scale in the scale list. Now I can go back in here, select that object, go back in, and there's the 1:1, there's the 1/4 equals 1 inch. Now I can delete that from this object, and sure enough, because my drawing scale is set to 1:1, it will not display at the 1:1 scale. But if I go back and change the current drawing scale to 1/4 of an inch, there is our object. So that object has right now only the 1/4 inch equals 1 foot scale applied to it. Therefore, it will only show when the drawing scale is set at 1/4 inch equals 1 foot, or if that button is turned on that allows AutoCAD to show all annotation objects no matter what the scale. Now, another thing I can do here is click on this object and then right-click, and on the pop-up menu, so I don't really need to go into the properties menu, but on the pop-up menu, you will see that there is in the list annotative scale, annotative object scale, and I can add and delete scales. So I could click on that, and that same little dialog opens up that we saw in the properties. And here again I can add. So I'm going to select a couple of other scales. I'm going to select 3/16. And while I'm in here, I'm going to hold down my control button and pick also say 1/8 of an inch. So I've selected two scales, 1/8 of an inch and 3/16 of an inch, and added them to my scale list for this particular object. So there they are, three different scales that this object can be displayed at. So now if I go, and let me zoom in a little closer to this so you can kind of see what's happening. I'm going to change the drawing scale. Yeah, I'll fill the screen a little bit better with it. So I'm going to change the drawing scale down on my annotative scale control down here on the status bar, and I'm going to change it to 1/8. So I change it to 1/8. The object is still visible, and notice that the size of the objects, the size of the components of the object change accordingly. So now I'm going to go to 3/16. It changes again, and go back to 1/4 of an inch, and it changes again, but it is displayed at all of those three scales, and it corrects itself automatically so that the components of the dimension object show appropriately at the scale being displayed. Now this looks a little funny here in model space, but when we get into paper space, this starts making a lot of sense, because we will be showing things at various scales in various viewports. So let me click on a layout tab that's here. This is one of the standard tabs, and we see there's our drawing and one of the kind of default viewports that open up. So I'm going to open up, double click on this viewport, and going to change the scale of the viewport by selecting the viewport and then going over and setting the viewport scale. So there I've set the viewport scale at 1/8 inch equals 1 foot. And now I'm just going to open that viewport and pan so that we can see our plan. And what you'll see is there is our plan now being displayed at 1/8 of an inch, meaning if we printed this page right now, it would come out at 1/8 inch equals 1 foot scale, and our drawing would show and our dimension would show. So I'm going to make the viewport a little bigger so we can kind of see a little bit. And I think here we will zoom in a little closer onto in paper space. And now that we've done that, I'm going to change the scale of the viewport, select the viewport boundary to select the viewport, and then I'm going to change the scale down here to 1/4 of an inch. First I have to drag this down, if I can grab it. There we go. Now I see 1/4 of an inch and change it, and we see the viewport changes and the dimension object changes accordingly. So because that dimension object has several different scales associated to it, we can change the scale of this viewport however we would need for our presentation. So I'm going to change it now to 3/16. The scale, the viewport zooms accordingly, and the dimension object updates itself to show appropriately. And I can go and change it to 1/8. And again, the view gets smaller because it's a 1/8 scale, but the dimension object is still visible and has corrected itself in terms of the size of its components, its text, its arrowheads and such, so that they display correctly at that scale. So remember, in each of these cases, every time we go and change one of these, say to another 3/16 of an inch, go back, or go back even again to the 1/4 of an inch, the dimension object is changing size, but in each case, if we had plotted that, that dimension text would always be 3/32 of an inch high on our paper. So that's what the associative property is doing for us. So let's go back to the model space drawing, and we still have our initial dimension object that we placed there. That object has 3 different scales associated to it. And you see as we hover over it here, we get the little annotative property icon. I'll zoom in a little closer, you can see a little better. There, just as I hover over it, it says it's a rotated dimension, and we get the 2 little icons, which means that this object has more than one annotative scale applied to it. So that's what that, anytime you see those double symbols, that means that there's more than one scale applied to that object, more than one annotative scale applied to it. So it seems that I've been placing these on the wrong layer, so let me click on that and change this object to the Anno-DIMS layer. And then I'm going to place a few more dimensions on our drawing, and so let me make sure that the Anno-DIMS layer is the active layer for us, Anno-DIMS. So there we go, we set that, and I'm going to take a look down at the front of our building and place a string of dimensions there. So go back to my annotation tab, click on linear, and make sure we're working at 1/4 inch equals 1 foot. So there's my scale set there. So here I'll place a linear dimension, drag it out, locate the dimension line, click. And now because I want to do a string of dimensions across the front, I can go back up here to my panel and click on the continue option, and my dimension continues right across, and I can click on all the various points that I would like to dimension to. So we get the doors, we get the space between the door and the window, and then to the corner of the building, and then hit enter and enter again to get out of the dimension command. So there's our string of dimensions, and that string, all those dimensions have were placed at the 1/4 inch scale, so that's the scale they have associated to them. So let me do another overall dimension, linear from one corner all the way to the other corner. So that gives us an overall for the outside front of the building. So there we have a string of dimensions down the front, and now if I change the scale of my drawing to say 1/8, that string disappears. And the reason it does that is because it was placed at 1/4 inch. But notice that the dimension that we had placed initially at the other end of our building, that stays and just changes its size accordingly. So one of the things that we need to do is add that property, add that scale rather, to our objects we just placed at the front. So I'm going to use that button to show all annotation objects no matter what scale. Select all those dimensions that we placed in the front, open up the Properties tab, and open up the annotative scale and add. And now I can add the 1/8 and the 3/16. Hold down the Control button to be able to select more than one. Go OK, and now they're all added to those dimension objects. So they will now display accordingly at any one of those three scales, 1/8, 1/4, or 3/16. So I can go back down here, shut that show all scales, and go back and change the scale of my drawing to 1/8, and all the dimensions now update accordingly, and go to 1/4. And so everything is working nicely with all my dimension objects so far that I've placed on my drawing. So that in general is the process when adding annotative dimensions to our drawing, dimension styles that have the annotative property. The important thing is to make sure you look and see what the drawing scale is set at down there on your status bar with all of the annotative controls, and note that what you are placing the dimension object at what scale you're placing the dimension object at. Now this whole process is similar for other kinds of annotative objects such as text and leaders. So why don't we take a break from the dimensions and go in and take a look at what happens when we add text objects to our drawing. So let's go change the active layer to the Anno text and go to our annotation bar and check and see what our style is, and I'm going to set it to Anno labels, and again that has the little symbol next to it so you know it is an annotative style. It has the annotative property associated to it. And let's place a single line text. Just going to place the names of these rooms and take a look at what happens on the command line. It's telling us the text height is 6 inches. And why is that? Well, it's because our scale is set at 1/4 inch, and if you remember, the size of our text was 1/8 of an inch, so that in fact is 6 inches at 1/4. So I'm going to change the justification to middle center, pick a point on my screen, rotation is 0, hit enter, and then type in the name of the room, in this case office. And then while I'm here, I'll give it the little underline and that little code 00U we put in for single line text. And then there is our text object naming the room. It was placed at 1/4 inch. You'll see it has the little symbol over it. And just like we've seen before, if I go to 1/8, that object disappears because it only has the 1/4 inch property associated to it, the 1/4 inch scale associated to its annotative property. So just like we've done before with the dimensions, click on it, right click, bring up the annotative scales, scale list, go in and add the other scales. So in this case 1/8, 3/16, go OK. And now there they are, all in the list associated with this particular object. So now, just like our dimensions, if we click and change the drawing scale down here, we can go to 1/8, it will change. We can go to 3/16, it will change. And we can go to 1/4. It displays and then corrects its size to change appropriately. So with dimension objects, it has a little bit of a benefit because we can just take this one object now and copy it around into the various other spaces here. And because we've already added the scale list to this one object, that gets copied with it. So all we have to do is just edit the text. So here I can change office to the service bay, and also note that it's still picking up the underline. This is the mechanical room, so I can just double click on that and edit the text to be mechanical. Whoops, it's an L. Make sure there's an L there. Okay. And the same over here where this is a storage room. Just edit the text to be storage or store, period. And now, because we just copy that initial text object around, they all have the multiple scales associated with it. So I can change the drawing scale, 3/16, 1/8, 1/4, and all of the text updates accordingly. So that's one of the advantages of working with the text, in that all you have to do is place one object and associate the proper scale list to it, and then just copy that object around, and it carries that property with it. Let's jump into Paperspace on our Layout tab and take a look at what's going on here now. We can see what's happening with not only the dimension but also the text objects, and again click the viewport border and change the scale of the viewport to 1/8. The zoom changes and the text updates itself so that it is displayed appropriately at the right size. Okay, so that's similar to what we saw happening with the dimension objects in Paperspace in our viewport. So let's add another annotative object here, annotation object using the annotative property. Let's add a leader, and we don't really have many calls for this in our drawing, but just to demonstrate how this works. So let's do let's put a note, a leader note, say right over here. So we'll click on the multi-leader command to start the command. Let's put a note right over here where our little restroom is, and put a note on our water closet. And again, we're adding this note. Just going to put in, say, existing fixture. This is a typical note you will see in construction and demolition type drawings. Existing fixture, and let's tell them to remove, and we're going to save for reuse at another location or something. If it's a fairly new fixture, it might be worth doing that, especially if you're on a tight budget. So there's a note that we can add onto onto our drawing for the demolition. And here, that is a object, leader object, and that was placed at the 1/4 inch scales. We hover over it. It has the little icon, the single icon. It has a single scale. So again, same process. Change the drawing scale and to another scale, so the 1/8 inch. That disappears, but the other text remains and changes in size. The leader object only has the one scale associated. So same process as we've done before. Click on that object, right click, bring up the menu, add scale list, click add scale, add your scales, click on the various sizes, 1/8, 3/16, go OK, and they get added to the object. And now again, if we go back and test that out and change the scale of our drawing in model space, everything is working, everything displays and just changes its size accordingly based on the scale of the drawing. So that's one way to do it, and that's one of the tools you have available to you if in fact you need to, if you are placing annotative objects. So let's go back and add some dimensions, and this time we're going to turn on a tool. Well, first of all, let's place the dimensions on our drawing, and we'll place linear dimensions similar to what we did before across the front, this time up the side along our high bay portion. But before we do that, let's turn on the tool. Let's go and down here, it says add scales to annotative objects when the annotation scale changes. Right now it's off. I'm going to click that on. And now let's go back and place our dimensions. So we're placing this string of dimensions up along the outside of our high bay, and just like we did before, we'll place one, locate the dimension line, click on the continue option, and then continue right up the side, marking the distance between each of the openings and each of the wall segments right up the side of the building, and get right to the end. And now just like we did before too, let's do an overall dimension. So we'll go and we'll just pick simply the linear and click way down at the bottom corner here, then all the way up at the top corner, and drag that out and place that dimension on the outside of our string. So again, that was all placed at 1/4 inch. But we have that little icon turned on, that add scale, the automatic add scale. So now if I go change, we see what happens there. We change the scale of the drawing to 1/8, we change the scale to 3/16, and now all the objects are updating, and we didn't have to go and manually apply those scales to that string of dimensions we did vertically along the side. That's because that little button was turned on. Add scales to annotative objects when the annotation scale changes. Let's turn it off and try a little experiment. So we will zoom back out, and I'm going to change the scale of our drawing to say something like 1/2 inch, something dramatically different. And everything shuts off. Why? Because none of them have the 1/2 inch scale, and the button that would have allowed that scale to be added was shut off. And let's go back to 1/4 inch. So that is a introduction to working with the annotative property when placing dimensions on your drawing and the other annotative objects. Hope you find that helpful. Thanks very much.